Jaden Ivey's extension. The talk continues. How much is he worth? We're going to break that down and come to an answer in today's episode, Locked On Pistons Podcast. Let's go.
You are Locked On Pistons, your daily Detroit Pistons podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's the deal? Welcome back to another episode of the Locked On Pistons podcast. Per usual, I am your host, Ku Khahil. I've been covering the Detroit Pistons over the last 4 years for the Locked On Network, being a credential media member over the last 3 years. I appreciate all of you guys who make Locked On Pistons your first listen of every single day, the everydayers. I appreciate all the support you guys have given me and continue to give the podcast every single day, even during the offseason. We keep it going. And today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDINNBA for $20 off your first purchase. In today's episode, we'll be talking about a little later whether Marcus Sasser is a hidden gem on the Detroit Pistons waiting to be found. I wrote about this over on the SUBSTACK a week and a half ago, or about, not even a week and a half ago, a week ago now. I'll link that down below for you guys to read it if you guys want to check it out. It has a lot more film breakdown, but we'll discuss it on the podcast today. And then also the Pistons signed Javonte Green. They're now at 14 roster spots. We'll talk about what that means a little bit later as well, but we're going to start with everyone's favorite Detroit Piston, Jaden Ivey. He obviously is up for a potential contract extension this offseason. We've talked about that a lot. Him and Jalen Duren, which we'll talk about Jalen Duren in the next episode. We'll talk about how much he is worth again in the next episode. But Jaden Ivey up for an extension this offseason. And there's been a lot of talk over the last few days about how much is he actually worth, because John Hollinger of The Athletic put out an article talking about why we're seeing the stalemates in restricted free agency with like a Quentin Grimes, with a Jonathan Kuminga. We got a recent report about Bennedict Mathurin and what he's wanting from the Pacers and them being off. So John Hollinger wrote a whole article about how restricted free agency is working, why it's not, picking up as much as it did maybe in the past. And then he went through multiple players from the 2022 and 2023 drafts that are up for an extension or have recently gotten paid, and discussed, where their situation sits. And what he said about Jaden Ivey caused a lot of talking, I should say, within the Pistons community. So I'm going to read you what he said about Jaden Ivey, and then I'm going to give you guys my thoughts, obviously. But he wrote, after a 2024-2025 season that was mostly lost to injury, I have a hard time seeing how the Pistons and Ivey could come to a resolution on a long-term number. The Pistons are under no long-term cap pressure and can afford to wait a year and gather even more information, even if it costs them a bit if Ivey breaks out. There's also a fascinating cap scenario where Detroit gives Ivey a one-year balloon payment next summer to set itself up for either in-season trades or 2027 cap space. Now, real quickly, I don't know what that one-year cap nerd scenario that he talks about in here. I'm trying to figure out what exactly that is. I don't think the Pistons are going to do that, but I'm trying to get a little bit more explanation on what that whole cap nerd scenario is that he's talking about. But he goes on to say, meanwhile, Ivey likely has just as much incentive to push up the value of his next contract rather than settle, my goodness, for what would likely be an MLE-ish type money on an extension. For what it's worth, his board evaluation only sees him as a $10 million value player, and surely Ivey would frown at any figure in that range. So everyone was kind of up in arms over the $10 million value. Now, that is just John Hollinger's board evaluation of contracts, and he has Ivey in the $10 million range. Obviously, I don't think anyone agrees that Jaden Ivey is a $10 million player. He is more than a $10 million player. Jaden Ivey, yes, would definitely probably ask for a trade as soon as if someone tried to offer him $10 million. That's just a model that he put together. It's just a model that has, its own calculations, whatever. He's not worth a $10 million player. He's not a $10 million player. He is more than that. I'm not going to spend too much time with that. What I want to go to is this, though. Because everyone's kind of like, I don't feel like I've really seen a lot of people kind of hammer down an exact number that they actually want to pay Ivey. It's kind of been a little dancing around like the exact contract of what it should look like. So I think this context is needed here. Jaden Ivey has a lot of fans in this community. He has a lot of fans, a lot of stands in this community, in the Pistons fan base. A lot of people think very highly of him. But what has to be understood, is this. The market for his type of archetype and what that market looks like. And then also understand that the Pistons, I think Hollinger 100% is correct, that the Pistons are in a wait and see and just gather more information situation right now. So let's go. I went and found every player I believe that is of the same type of archetype as either one the same type of archetype as Ivey, around the same age as Ivey, and kind of serves the same purpose for their team as Ivey. I found a bunch of players, and I went through and found their contracts. So I want to go through and name their contracts. So Colin Sexton, he's making $18.9 million on his contract this year. He had to be attached with a second-round pick to be moved. Anthony Simons, offensive heavy player, very efficient offensive player, but bad defender. $27.6 million was basically traded to the Boston Celtics as part of some cap relief, and the Celtics are still trying to find a way to move him to create even more cap relief. Cam Thomas. Sounds like that people or the Nets want to pay him around $16 million a year, and Cam Thomas is looking for $25+ million a year. Sounds like he might go ahead and settle for the qualifying offer of around $6 million because of that difference. But sounds like from what I've read that most people have him valued at around a $16 million contract, which is probably where Brooklyn would feel comfortable signing him at. They haven't come to a resolution yet. Tyler Hero, offensive heavy all-star, $31 million player. Now, we've heard some reports over this summer and read some things over this summer that teams aren't exactly enthusiastic about taking that contract on in a trade. And it's why Miami maybe hasn't been able to get as many deals as they'd like to get done. Hero's a very good player, but it sounds like maybe teams don't want to pay that much for an offensive heavy player that lacks defense. But Tyler Hero probably is the best player in this group, or one of the best players in this group. And I'd say probably has come the closest to deserving that type of money. But let's keep it going. Norman Powell, $18 million, was just moved. Had a great season this past year. He's making 18. Jalen Green is making $33 million this year. And that is the bar, it seems like players of Ivey's archetype, like a Cam Thomas, like a Benedict Mathurin, it seems like that's the contract they're looking at and saying, well, if Jalen Green got $33 million, I want that too. And the problem is, Jalen Green's not worth that $33 million. Everyone agrees that he's not worth that $33 million. And everyone in the front offices across the NBA are saying, just because one team gave him a bad contract doesn't mean we need to give you guys a bad contract. And the only reason why the Houston Rockets structured Jalen Green's contract in which the way they did was solely for the purpose of trading him. And something Jalen Green even talked about after getting traded. They structured this contract simply to have salary matching purposes to go make a trade for him a year later. And that's exactly what they did. Now, we'll see if he blows up with the Suns. I don't think it's likely, but Jalen Green for sure has not come close to earning $33 million, so using him as the standard is just not fair. Jordan Poole, $31 million, a guy who was shipped out to Washington, kind of has been forgot about. He's an efficient scorer, one of the best pull-up shooters in the NBA this past year, but again, not the greatest playmaker and not a very good defender. Is he worth $31 million? Who knows? Austin Reeves is projected to make $30+ million on his next contract for the Los Angeles Lakers. He might be the best player on this list, depending on who you ask. He's probably around worth that much. Malik Monk, $18 to $20 million is what he's making this year and next year. Malik Monk can't be traded, apparently, by the Sacramento Kings. No one wants to take on his contract. Doesn't make much sense, but to me, at least, I think he's worth that much. But still, $18 to $20 million for a guy who was in Sixth Man of the Year running it just 2 years ago? Apparently hard to trade somehow. Emmanuel Quickly, $32.5 million. Toronto wishes they didn't sign him to that contract, as they've seen to try to trade him over the last year or so, and not many people seem to be interested in paying Emmanuel Quickly $32.5 million. You go on to Derek White, who probably, another player that you would argue is the best player on this list, is making $28 to $34 million over the next few years. I think he's worth maybe even more than that contract. But he is definitely earning every bit of that contract. Derek White probably is the best player. And then you got Jalen Suggs, who signed. He was around the same age as Ivey, got drafted around the same time as Ivey. Is making $35 million this year, but it's de-escalating every year after that to, I believe, around $26 million. So it's a good contract for the Orlando Magic. I list all those contracts for a reason, because I don't want everyone to just be throwing out contract numbers of Jaden Ivey and not looking at what the market is telling us. So the market, after looking at those contracts, what the market is telling me is that these high-level scorers, they're peaking at around $30 million. And the teams that given these high, these offensive scorers that aren't that great defensively, once they do give these guys that large contract like that, most of them have started to regret it. So And then also we've discussed multiple times about some of these players being hard to move apparently. Even, again, like a Malik Monk who's on an $18 to $20 million contract. So, in my opinion, what I would pay Ivy, I think what is a reasonable expectation or a reasonable ask, a reasonable contract for Jaden Ivey if he signs this summer, which I don't think is smart for him because I think if he plays better, he could get more next year. And maybe the Pistons would be obviously more willing to give him more money if they get another season's worth of him playing. So I agree that he probably won't sign this summer because I just don't think it makes sense for either side to sign unless the Pistons give him on a good deal. Then it makes sense for the Pistons. But I believe Ivey is probably worth, because you also are paying for a little projection as well, I guess. I feel like he's somewhere between $22 and $24 million. I think that's where $20 to $24 million in that range, it should be where the Pistons are at. I think that's probably where they are at. And I don't think Ivey's willing to take that. I think the Pistons may even go lower to around $18 to $24 million. But I think that's where he should probably be valued at as of right now. Now, obviously, he could be better in the future, which is why it probably makes more sense for Jaden Ivey to not sign an extension this offseason. Just wait till next year, go into restricted free agency, and see, after a good season, see if he gets a pay raise, which he probably would. But as of right now, it doesn't make sense for the Detroit Pistons with an extension coming up for Duren as well, an extension coming up for Ron Holland and Asar Thompson in the next 2 or Asar next year, Jalen Duren potentially this year as well. I don't think it makes sense for the Pistons to go up to the numbers of the guys like a Jordan Poole or a Jalen Green or a Tyler Hero, where the team, or Emmanuel Quickly, where teams seem like they regret giving them that money. Stay in a range, as of right now, based off what that player's shown you, that feels comfortable for you, that if it doesn't work out, you can still move him without having to attach multiple assets because he's viewed as a bad contract. You have to be safe. You have to be safe with this. And everything we've seen from Trajan, that he's a very patient and safe GM, or president of basketball operations. So I believe $20 to $24 million is where the Pistons are at. I think that's a fair evaluation. I do think, however, that Jaden Ivey probably would not like that, and he will go into the season waiting to see if he can get more than that. So we'll see what happens, but is he worth $10 million like that model said? Absolutely not. He's worth more than that. That's insulting. Is he worth the $33 million from Jalen Green? Absolutely not. Do you want to pay him around Quickly money, Jordan Poole money? No, you don't. The Pistons will not pay him that much. So I think $20 to $24 million a year, maybe a 4-year, $90 million deal. What is that? That's around 22 and a half, I believe. 4 years. Let me just make sure I got this right. Yeah, 22 and a half. I think that's probably what the Pistons will offer, or are hovering around. Maybe 4-year, 97, something like that. Maybe at the most 4 years, 100. But I think that's around the area you're looking at right now. So we'll see if it happens. But I remain in the camp of an extension won't be done with Ivey this summer, because it doesn't make sense for Ivey to take that low of a number if he thinks he's more than that, and it definitely doesn't make sense for the Pistons to go that high of a number that Ivey probably wants right now. So let me know, comment section down below or over on Twitter at Ku Khahil. How much do you guys think Jaden Ivey is worth, and how much would you pay Jaden Ivey on a contract extension this offseason? Let me know, comment section down below or over on Twitter at Ku Khahil. But coming up is Marcus Sasser, one of the only first-round picks left from before, or not one of the only first-round picks left, but one of the only first-round picks, actually the only first-round pick that doesn't get consistent rotation minutes. Is he actually a hidden gem on the Pistons roster waiting to be found? We'll talk about that coming up. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. We've all been there, logging on early and waiting forever for concert tickets to go on sale, only to lose your spot for a show you've been dying to see. Live music should be about making memories, not dealing with the stress of ticket shopping. That's where Game Time comes in. Game Time makes getting concert tickets faster and easier than ever. Prices actually drop as you get closer. To showtime, you can save up to 60% off with their killer last-minute deals. Tired of endless scrolling trying to find the best deal? Game Time Zone Deals. Pick the best seats in their section for you. Ever wonder what your view will actually look like before you purchase your tickets? The app shows you a panoramic seat view, so there are no surprises when you get to the event. Take the guesswork out of buying concert and show tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDINNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Download the Game Time app today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed with Game Time. So I want to thank you guys again for making Locked On Pistons your first listen of every single day. We are free and available on all your podcast platforms. If you haven't already, head to the YouTube channel at Locked On Pistons. Hit that subscribe button or leave us a 5-star review on whatever podcast platform you're listening to us on. That's another great way to support the podcast. I do want to say, just real quickly, final point on the Jaden Ivey topic we just went over. I should have mentioned this, but I probably wasted a little bit too much time, to be honest, going through all the contracts. We probably should have done that a little bit faster so I could have got this point in. I know the immediate response will be, and it's a good argument, that if you pay Ivy early, even if you pay him a little bit more than what he's worth right now, maybe you end up getting him on a bargain later on because of, like, for example, a player on the team, Isaiah Stewart. At the time, maybe Isaiah Stewart wasn't worth that contract at the time, but now it's looked at as an incredible contract, but he's probably worth more than that contract. So maybe if you sign Ivy to a little bit more right now, maybe you sign him to $26, $27, $28 million this summer. He's not worth that right now. But maybe you believe, okay, next year he's going to be so great that if we wait, we'll have to pay $33 million. Maybe if you look at it from the Pistons' perspective, if that's the way you look at it, I can understand that point of view for sure. However, Trajan Langdon has proven and shown that he is a patient person, and he said over and over, and I've said over and over, what I've heard is that they're in a gathering information phase right now. So I believe it's not impossible. We have 2 months to go. Maybe they come to an agreement on a contract. Definitely could happen. Not saying it's impossible at all. Just based off what we've been told from Trajan Langdon, based off what I've heard, I think that it's much more likely that Trajan just plays patient. And like Hollinger mentioned in The Athletic article, the Pistons will pay. They're okay with simply paying more this next offseason if they get more information about whether Ivy is what they want from him. So I just wanted to make that final point. But now let's move into Marcus Sasser, who could be a hidden gem on the Detroit Pistons roster. I wrote about this over on the Substack. I'll link it down below for you guys. But I think most people who've listened to this podcast for years, first of all, I appreciate all of you guys. You guys probably know I haven't been the biggest fan of Marcus Sasser. And I think majority, after really thinking about it and writing about it, I think the main reason why I haven't been the biggest fan of Marcus Sasser is because he's simply been played out of position. We've talked about that a lot. They've tried to force him into being this point guard, and this is something that Marcus Sasser talked about before last season, where he talked about how throughout the offseason, throughout Summer League, he's really tried to improve at being a point guard, being someone who can run an offense, because he knows that's what they want him to be. That's simply not what Marcus Sasser is. He is not that type of player. He is not a floor general. He's not someone you really want playmaking. He's not someone you want running your offense. That's not the type of player he was. And when he was drafted by Troy Weaver years ago, at his press conference, they talked about him and Weaver both discussed how he can play next to bigger ball handlers and be that off-ball player. Next, and I know this name scares people, but Killian Hayes at the time, they mentioned. Obviously, Cade. Like, that was the idea of when they drafted Sasser, was for him to play next to bigger guards and him just be this off-ball scoring threat, which he can do. But since then, obviously Weaver's gone. The coach has changed. It was Monty Williams. He's gone. And now, again, after a year, his rookie season, where he played a little bit more point guard than I would have even liked, and I don't think Monty Williams even really bought into it, but whatever. Then this past year, J.B. Bickerstaff had him basically playing all of his minutes at the point guard position. According to Basketball Reference, more than 95% of his minutes were at the point guard position, which, again, just is not what he's great at. And the best number, it's hard to find numbers that, like, just raw numbers that can point this out, but I think this does the best job of doing so. Before the Pistons acquired Dennis Schroeder, in the non-Cade minutes, they lost those minutes by 4.4 points per 100 possessions. After acquiring Dennis Schroeder, the Pistons outscored their opponents in the non-Cade minutes by 5.1 points per 100 possessions. What is that? Around a 9.5, 9.6 on-off difference? The Pistons went from losing Cade's minutes badly to badly winning in his 9 minutes. And it's mostly due, obviously, to Dennis Schroeder, a real point guard, coming in and having those minutes instead of trying to force Marcus Sasser into what he isn't. I think that has caused a lot of people, and maybe even myself, to look at Marcus Sasser and kind of just make him an afterthought. And it's like, whatever. He's not really a player right now. Let's just, toss him to the side. You can't look at him as a real player. However, when you look into his season this past year, Sasser had a pretty efficient and one of those seasons, I feel like that if the Pistons traded for this player, who didn't play a lot of minutes, that wasn't a part of the mainstay rotation of their current team. They trade for this player, and then you dive into these numbers. You're like, okay, I can see why they believe there's more here, and you could have gotten a steal here. I think that's how you should look at Marcus Sasser here. Past year, career highs in 3-point percentage, 38.2%. Career high in 2-point percentage, 54.9%. Career high in true shooting percentage, 58.9%. He had an efficient scoring season. He shot 47% from mid-range, 77th percentile in the NBA. He finished in the 80th percentile as a pick-and-roll ball handler, scoring .99 points per 100 possessions. Or per possession, not per 100 possessions, per possessions. According to the shot creator, Sasser had a 53.3 efficiency field goal percentage on pull-up jumpers. This would rank in the 29th of 150 qualifying players this past year. He shot 55% on floaters, 52.6% on non-rim paint looks. Shot 52.5% on step-backs this past year. I mean, just in every way possible, he was, in his limited minutes, whenever he got the chance, he showed that while he may not be a point guard, he is a legit scorer. He is a legit microwave scorer that can score in bunches in short time. You give him 2 minutes, tell him to go out there and score, he could score 8 points in those 2 minutes. He's a legit scorer off the bench. Now, a lot of this is on small sample, so I guess if you want to take it with a grain of salt, but the film, which I included in the article, if you want to read it, we did some film breakdowns, which I think you guys will really enjoy if you haven't checked it out. The film backs this up. You watch Sasser play over the last 2 years, the numbers don't just sound like a small sample, oh, you can't really read into it. You watch him play, this backs it up. He gets a ton of creation with his handle on shot creation. Ton of separation. He has great touch in the mid-range area, great touch in the paint, great touch on floaters, great touch on his shots. You see him get a shooter's bounce consistently. You'll see him barely touch rim on a lot of his jumpers. He has a very, very feathery touch, which helps him a lot in the paint, despite being such a small guard. In isolation this past year, 91st percentile in the NBA, scoring 1.13 points per possession. He can score in every way possible. So, is it possible that he is a hidden gem? I think so. I think Marcus Sasser could be a legit player in the NBA if another team identifies him and goes after him. The reason why I say another team is because I don't think that opportunity is going to come this year for the Pistons still. One, I think the only open area technically, if you want to try to get too technical, is, I guess, the backup point guard position, if you don't want to consider Ivey or Caris LeVert point guards. The problem is that both of them are going to take those backup point guard minutes. They went and got Caris LeVert, who's going to play, who the whole point of getting Caris LeVert was to play that scorer off the bench role, like the guy who's going to be asked to be a scorer. He has a little bit more size, better defender, obviously, not a little bit, much bigger size. He's going to take those minutes. And then the backup point guard, whether you play LeVert at the 2 or the 1, we've heard over and over that Ivey's going to get a lot of his minutes at the backup point guard position, and they want to see how he looks as a backup point guard. You have Cade still. You have Asar and Ron, who are probably going to take some of those minutes at the 2 or 3. Maybe even a Duncan Robinson. The pathway to minutes for Sasser, pathway to consistent rotation minutes for this team, the pathway to being not a point guard, just asked to be a microwave scorer off the bench, it's just not there for the Pistons, I don't believe, this year. And if you believe there is, I'd love for you to paint me out the rotation that has all of the players that the Pistons acquired, plus Ron and Asar getting more minutes than they did last year, because remember, Asar was on a minutes restriction, and Ron was a rookie. Ron's going to get more minutes this year. Asar's not going to be on a minutes restriction anymore. That has also Jaden Ivey in the backup point guard minutes we've heard that they want to give him. It's just not there. So I think if I was Marcus Sasser, he's going to be 25 in the season, so he is an older prospect. If I was Marcus Sasser, I would be asking for a trade. And I know that there's some Sasser fans in the Pistons community that probably won't like to hear that, but step away from that angle and just look at it this way. There is no real pathway for minutes with him. And he's 25. He wasn't drafted as an 18, 19-year-old prospect that could sit 3 to 4 years, come in when he's 22, 23, and then still have a 7 to 8 year prime and not have to worry about it. He's already going to be 25. His prime is knocking on the door. It's not like he has another 10 years to go. He was an older prospect. He's only getting older, and it still doesn't look like in year 3 he's going to have a real pathway to minutes and playing the way in which he thrives at. So if I was Sasser, I would ask for a trade. I would ask to go find somewhere else. And I think another team that identifies him could get a real gem for a low price from the Detroit Pistons. The question, obviously, or the pushback will be, well, Ku, why shouldn't the Pistons just make room for him if you think he's this much of a gem? I mean, yeah, they could. They could have, but they didn't. They didn't. Unless they trade all these players that they just acquired. Like, it's clear that he's not in their rotation plans this year. And he might, if he is, it will be, again, like the 10th man spot where he gets like maybe 8 minutes here or 10 minutes there or, that kind of thing. A player that I am comparing him a lot to, Payton Pritchard. He was an older prospect. He showed that he could score early on. They didn't play a lot for the Boston Celtics, but they ended up making a room for him, and now he just won Sixth Man of the Year. Now, Payton Pritchard did wait a long time. Maybe, but he ended up playing a little bit. He played a little bit more than Sasser did. He was a part of the rotation consistently, but he wasn't really unleashed until this past year to play these heavy minutes. I think that's what Sasser's like. I think he's not on ball, but I mean, yeah, he can create on ball as a scorer. He's a guy you ask to go out there to score the basketball. You let him play 25 minutes, and he'll be able to go out there and score, and you surround him like the Celtics did with Pritchard. You surround him with big, athletic wings, good defenders, another guy who can handle the ball handling responsibilities as it comes to creating for the offense and playmaking, and ask him to just simply be a scorer. And we saw how well that worked for Payton Pritchard. I think that could work for Marcus Sasser as well. The problem is, I just don't see it happening for the Pistons. And if I'm Sasser, I'm not waiting any longer. I'm getting older. I like to have a long NBA career that I actually get to impact the game and play well and play minutes. And I'm already going to be 25. I don't have time to just keep sitting, waiting around for someone to eventually give me a chance. That's how I would feel if I was Marcus Sasser, but I do think there's something there that another team could take advantage of. And I honestly, for the best of Marcus Sasser, I hope he gets that chance. I think he could be a legit NBA player in this league. I just don't think he's going to get that chance here. So let me know in the comment section down below or over on Twitter at Ku Khahil. Do you guys believe that Marcus Sasser could be a hidden gem for another team to find on the Pistons roster? Or do you believe the Pistons should just try to find any way to get him minutes? Or do you just simply believe he's not as good as maybe I think he could be? Let me know. Comment section down below or over on Twitter at Ku Khahil. Coming up, the Pistons signed Javonte Green. They are now at 14 roster spots taken up. I'll talk to you guys about what that means for them coming up. So I want to thank you guys again for making Locked On Pistons your first list of every single day. We are free and available on all your podcast platforms. If you haven't already, head to the YouTube channel at Locked On Pistons. Hit that subscribe button or leave us a 5-star review on whatever podcast platform you're listening to this on. That's another great way to support the podcast. A few hours ago before I started recording this, I'm recording this midday of the 11th, Shams tweeted out in the morning that the Pistons have signed Javonte Green to a 1-year contract after he played this past year in Cleveland and New Orleans. He is around 32 years old. This will be now his 7th season in the NBA. What do I think about this signing? I think this signing basically is a nothing burger. He's going to be an end-of-bench guy. He's another athletic wing, defensive-minded guy that if, knock on wood, God forbid, Asar or Ron goes down, that maybe you feel good about playing him minutes because he can replicate some of the defensive stuff maybe. But I don't. Javonte Green is not someone who's going to get rotation minutes, and honestly, he's an end-of-bench guy, so you don't need to analyze it too much, basically. I was going to start analyzing it a little bit too much, but he's an end-of-bench guy. He's filling out the bench. Good for the locker room. He's a hard worker. Like, he is a culture fit. That is 100% true. And if Asar or Ron were, God forbid, knock on wood, suffer an injury, whatever, you need someone to come in and play some minutes, Javonte Green will come in and play defense, and he is athletic. What does this mean for the Pistons? Now, they did give out a 2-way contract to Dennis Jenkins. They're at 14 roster spots now, which means they can go into the season like this. Before, they needed to add at least one player to go into the season. Now they're at 14. They can go into the season, so they don't technically have to fill this last roster spot at 15. I know a lot of people believe, or there's a lot of people that want to believe, that the Pistons are going to keep that extra roster spot open in case the Malik Beasley stuff clears up, and they can give him a 1-year contract. I know Malik Beasley was live on Instagram or was answering questions on Instagram, something, whatever, not podcast, but social media platform he does these things. It might be Snapchat. I don't know what he'd be doing. I'd be seeing like the memes and stuff of what Malik Beasley be doing. It's interesting for sure, but like funny dude, I guess. But I don't keep track with it. But I know I saw a clip that someone asked him what's his plans for next year with the NBA. He said hopefully to return to the Pistons, or there's a few other teams that would be interested. The Pistons don't want him, and he's been wearing Pistons gear still. Like almost every video he puts out of him working out. So is it possible that the Pistons are keeping that roster spot open for him in case things clear up and they can just sign him back? For sure, that is possible. I think another likely scenario is that maybe they want to convert one of their two-way guys to a fully guaranteed deal, maybe like a Dan Shankins, if he plays really well and they want him maybe he plays really well and they believe him as a backup point guard or whatever. Maybe they want to give him a fully guaranteed contract as a roster spot. So I think that's probably more likely. I don't think, if I had to guess, I don't think they're going to make another signing this offseason. I think their offseason's done. I don't think you should expect to see anything else from them. If I had one critique about this signing, the only critique I have is I still feel like their weakest positions, or the positions they have the most, or the least, I should say, depth, they still are struggling at. Like, I would have loved if they wanted to go out and sign someone, go get a backup four, a veteran four that maybe doesn't play minutes, but if he has to, you trust that he can. If Tobias does go down, knock on wood, like you have somebody that can come in. I would have liked them to go after backup four, but again, it seems like they're really not prioritizing that. Seems like that they are planning on Ron or Asar or even both to take up a lot of those minutes. So I think that's probably the reason for that, but I would have liked to see it. The other position would be backup point guard, because while you want to give Ivey all those minutes and maybe LeVert can do it, I don't think either of them are natural point guards, and they don't really have anyone else on the roster that can do it. And you could certainly make the argument that Cade's really the only one on the roster that can do it. So I probably would have, spent one of these roster spots on a veteran PG that, again, doesn't have to play, but if someone does go down, you can play him and you trust that he knows how to run the offense. Things won't just fall apart if he's on the floor. It'll be a calming presence. That's what I would have done. I guess that's my only critique of signing Green instead. But again, it's an end of bench guy. It's not going to, I don't think it matters really all that much. There is still one roster spot open, but the main things you need to know: one roster spot open. They can go into the season like this now. Technically, they still can do that with Malik Beasley. Wait and give him this last roster spot, even though I don't know if that's incredibly likely. And I don't think that they're going to make any other signings. I think they probably will go into the season with an open roster spot and that TPE. Remember, they have that, around $14.5 million TPE that they got in the Dennis Schroeder signing trade, that they could use that TPE to just take on a player into that roster spot. That could definitely be also probably, actually, now that I'm thinking about it, that might be the most likely scenario, even though TPEs don't get used very often. That could be just Trajan trying to keep that option open to be flexible. And we know how much Trajan's talked about flexibility. So, but that's all I've got for you guys today on the signing. That's all I've got for you guys today on today's podcast. I appreciate all of you guys making Locked On Pistons your first listen of every single day. Free and available on all your podcast platforms. I hope you guys enjoyed today's episode. Leave us a 5-star review, whatever podcast platform you're listening to us on. Please hit that subscribe button. We are trying to get into the top 5 of most subscribed Locked On NBA channels. But until next time, I'll see you guys later. Stay safe out there, and peace out, everybody.